What if I told you that some of the most terrifying murders in history didn't happen on dark streets or in abandoned buildings, but behind the concrete walls and steel bars where society's worst are already locked away? Today, we're diving deep into the twisted minds of history's most dangerous prison killers. Inmates who turned correctional facilities into their personal hunting grounds and whose crimes were so shocking that even hardened criminals feared them. But before we begin this dark journey, I need to warn you. The stories you're about to hear will challenge everything you think you know about justice, human nature, and the thin line between civilization and chaos. These aren't just tales of violence. They're windows into minds so damaged and dangerous that even maximum security couldn't contain their evil. Picture this. You're a correctional officer walking down a dimly lit prison corridor at 3 a.m. The silence is deafening, broken only by the occasional snore or whispered conversation. Suddenly, you hear a scream that chills you to the bone. You rush toward the sound, keys jangling, only to discover a scene so horrific that it will haunt you for the rest of your life. This isn't fiction. This is the reality that prison staff face when dealing with inmates who have crossed a line that most of us can't even imagine. The first case that shocked the world happened in 1973 at the Marion Federal Penitentiary in Illinois. Thomas Silverstein, already serving life for armed robbery, was about to become something far worse than a common criminal. On October 22nd, Silverstein lured his cellmate, Danny Atwell, into what appeared to be a normal conversation. What happened next defied all logic and humanity. Using a makeshift weapon crafted from stolen metal, Silverstein didn't just kill Atwell. He systematically tortured him for hours, breaking bones one by one before finally ending his life. But here's what makes this case truly terrifying. Silverstein showed no remorse. When questioned by investigators, he calmly described the murder as if he were discussing the weather. He explained that he killed Atwell because he looked at him wrong during lunch. This wasn't a crime of passion or self-defense. This was calculated, cold-blooded murder committed by a man who had already lost all connection to human empathy. Silverstein's killing spree didn't end there. Over the next decade, he murdered 2 more inmates and a correctional officer, earning him the nickname America's Most Isolated Prisoner. He spent 36 years in solitary confinement, longer than any other inmate in U.S. history. During those decades alone, Silverstein created artwork, wrote poetry, and gave interviews where he spoke about his crimes with an eerie calmness that disturbed even seasoned psychologists. What creates a monster like Silverstein? Experts who studied his case discovered a pattern that would appear again and again in other prison killers: childhood abuse, early exposure to violence, and a complete breakdown of the psychological barriers that prevent most people from harming others. But perhaps most chilling is what Silverstein himself said in a 2008 interview. "I didn't become a killer in prison. Prison just gave me the opportunity to become what I already was. Let me take you inside another case that will make your skin crawl." Jeffrey Dahmer, already infamous for his cannibalistic murders on the outside, continued his reign of terror even behind bars. At the Columbia Correctional Institution in Wisconsin, Dahmer didn't kill anyone. But what he did was arguably worse. He psychologically tortured other inmates by creating grotesque sculptures out of food that resembled his victims' body parts. He would arrange these displays in the common areas, knowing that other prisoners would see them and be reminded of his horrific crimes. Fellow inmates described living in constant fear, not because they thought Dahmer would physically attack them, but because his presence was a constant reminder that true evil could wear a human face. One inmate, who served 3 years in the same facility as Dahmer, later said, "It wasn't what he did in prison that scared us. It was knowing what he was capable of. Every time he looked at you, you wondered if he was imagining what you would taste like." The psychological impact of sharing space with killers like Dahmer extends far beyond other inmates. Correctional officers, psychologists, and even visitors report experiencing nightmares, anxiety, and a fundamental shift in how they view human nature after encountering these individuals. Dr. Michael Stone, a forensic psychiatrist who has interviewed dozens of prison killers, described the experience as staring into an abyss that stares back at you. But perhaps no case illustrates the true horror of prison killers better than that of Karl Panzram, whose crimes spanned the early 1900s. Panzram didn't just kill in prison, he turned murder into a twisted form of entertainment. Between 1915 and 1930, while serving time in various correctional facilities, Panzram murdered at least 6 fellow inmates. But it wasn't just the killing that made him notorious. It was the methodical way he planned each murder. Like a chess game. Panzram would spend weeks studying his victims, learning their routines, their fears, their weaknesses. He would befriend them, gain their trust, and then strike when they least expected it. In one documented case, Panzram convinced an inmate named Robert Warnke that he had hidden money outside the prison and would share it with him upon release. For months, Panzram built this fantasy, creating elaborate stories about their future partnership. Then, one night in the prison laundry room, Panzram strangled Warnke with his own shoelaces while whispering, "There never was any money, you fool." What makes Panzram's case particularly disturbing is the detailed journal he kept throughout his imprisonment. In it, he documented not just his crimes, but his thoughts and feelings during each murder. He wrote about the rush he felt when taking a life, describing it as more addictive than any drug. He detailed how he would relive each killing in his mind, savoring the memory like a fine meal. These writings, discovered after his execution in 1930, provide a rare and terrifying glimpse into the mind of a true predator. The journal entries reveal something that modern psychology is only beginning to understand. Some individuals are not just capable of extreme violence, they are literally addicted to it. Panzram wrote, "Killing is the only thing that makes me feel alive. Everything else is just waiting." This addiction to violence helps explain why simply locking these individuals away isn't enough. They will find ways to feed their hunger, even in the most secure environments. Modern technology has given us new insights into the brains of these killers. MRI scans of inmates who have committed multiple murders in prison show significant differences in brain structure compared to other violent offenders. The areas responsible for empathy, impulse control, and moral reasoning are often severely underdeveloped or damaged. Dr. James Fallon, a neuroscientist who has studied the brains of dozens of killers, explains it this way. Imagine trying to feel empathy with a broken emotional processor. These individuals literally cannot experience remorse or genuine human connection the way most people do. This brings us to one of the most controversial questions in criminology. Are these individuals born evil, or are they created by circumstances? The case of Richard Ramirez, the infamous Night Stalker, provides some disturbing answers. Already serving life in prison for his serial killing spree in California, Ramirez continued to terrorize even from behind bars. He would send detailed letters to women on the outside, describing how he would torture and kill them if given the chance. But more horrifying were the murders he orchestrated from within the prison system. Using a network of gang connections, Ramirez arranged for the deaths of 2 fellow inmates who had disrespected him. He planned these murders with the same meticulous attention to detail that characterized his crimes on the outside. The killings were carried out exactly as Ramirez had specified, down to the positioning of the bodies. When investigators realized that Ramirez had essentially committed murder by proxy, they understood they were dealing with a level of evil that transcended physical imprisonment. What's particularly chilling about Ramirez's case is how he manipulated the system itself. He understood that even maximum security prisons have vulnerabilities, and he exploited every one of them. He corrupted guards with bribes, intimidated other inmates into carrying out his orders, and even managed to smuggle weapons into supposedly secure facilities. Prison officials later admitted that Ramirez had essentially turned parts of the prison into his personal kingdom, where his word was law and disobedience meant death. The psychological profiles of these prison killers reveal patterns that are as fascinating as they are terrifying. Most display what psychologists call institutional adaptation syndrome. They become so comfortable with the prison environment that they begin to see it as their natural habitat. Unlike other inmates who dream of freedom, these killers often prefer prison life because it provides them with a controlled environment where they can exercise power over others without the complications of the outside world. Dr. Robert Hare, creator of the psychopathy checklist, has interviewed hundreds of these individuals over his career. He describes them as predators who have found their perfect hunting ground. In his research, Hare discovered that the most dangerous prison killers share several key characteristics. They are highly intelligent, extremely manipulative, completely lacking in empathy, and possess an almost supernatural ability to identify and exploit weakness in others. One of the most disturbing aspects of these cases is how the killers often form followers among other inmates. Charles Manson, despite being isolated in maximum security, managed to recruit disciples even within the prison system. These followers would carry out acts of violence on Manson's behalf, seeing him as a prophet or leader. This phenomenon of prison cults has become an increasing concern for correctional administrators, as it demonstrates how dangerous individuals can extend their influence far beyond their physical reach. The case of Edmund Kemper, the co-ed killer, illustrates this perfectly. Despite being confined to a single cell for 23 hours a day, Kemper became a mentor figure to younger inmates. He would offer advice, mediate disputes, and provide emotional support, all while carefully selecting which inmates might be useful to him. Over a period of 5 years, Kemper orchestrated a series of attacks on inmates who had crossed him, using his followers as weapons while maintaining the appearance of being a model prisoner. What makes these prison killers even more dangerous is their ability to adapt and evolve. Unlike killers on the outside who are eventually caught and stopped, prison killers have unlimited time to perfect their methods. They study security procedures, learn guard schedules, and develop increasingly sophisticated ways to commit violence undetected. Some have become so skilled at manipulation that they can convince even experienced correctional officers that they are reformed, harmless individuals. The financial and emotional cost of housing these killers is staggering. The average cost of keeping a maximum security inmate incarcerated is over $80,000 per year. But the cost of housing the most dangerous killers can exceed $200,000 annually. This includes specialized housing, additional security measures, psychological evaluations, and the medical care needed to treat their victims. But the human cost is immeasurable. The families of their victims, the trauma experienced by other inmates and staff, and the erosion of public trust in the correctional system. Perhaps most disturbing is the fact that some of these killers have become celebrities. They receive fan mail, marriage proposals, and even book deals. This glorification of evil sends a dangerous message and can inspire copycat crimes. The case of Richard Ramirez is particularly troubling. Even after his death, he continues to receive letters and gifts from admirers who see him as a romantic figure rather than the monster he truly was. The question that haunts everyone who studies these cases is, how do we protect society from individuals who seem incapable of rehabilitation? Traditional approaches to correction and punishment appear to have no effect on these killers. They show no remorse, feel no guilt, and given the opportunity, would almost certainly kill again. Some experts argue for permanent isolation, while others advocate for more research into the biological and psychological factors that create such individuals. What we do know is that the problem is far from solved. Every year, new cases emerge of inmates who cross the line from criminal to killer. The stories I've shared today represent just a small fraction of the violence that occurs within our prison systems. Behind those concrete walls and steel bars, predators continue to hunt, and innocent people continue to die. As we conclude this disturbing journey into the minds of history's most dangerous prison killers, one thing becomes clear. The monsters we create through our society, our justice system, and our failures to address the root causes of such extreme violence continue to haunt us long after we think we've locked them away. The question isn't just how to contain these killers, it's how to prevent creating them in the first place. The next time you pass by a prison or correctional facility, remember that behind those walls are not just people who have made mistakes, but individuals who have traveled so far down the path of darkness that they may never find their way back to the light. And in some cases, they have no desire to return at all. These stories force us to confront uncomfortable truths about human nature, the limits of justice, and the thin veneer of civilization that separates order from chaos. The most dangerous prison killers remind us that evil is not just a concept from horror movies. It's a real force that exists in our world, sometimes wearing a human face and always waiting for the opportunity to strike again.